The Millennial Conservative Resistance continues here on Mojo 50 Radio. I'm your host, Andrew Coppins. You're tuned into Critical Thinking, the second of the three-part Millennial Conservative Resistance, every Saturday right here on Mojo 50 Radio. Do not forget my partners in crime, Pat Oney and the Pat Oney Show at 3 p.m. Central Time, and then closing things out like the stud that he is Matthew Holloway and the HollowNet program at 6 p.m. Central Time, immediately following this very show. So please continue to support the Millennial Conservative Resistance right here on Mojo 50 Radio. Wherever shall this show start, though? Well, 10 million people are unemployed in 2 weeks. Boy, oh boy, what a time we're living in. So much fun. And folks, I'm one of those 10 million people, and I'm guessing there are lots of you out there listening via iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and of course, Mojo50.com, or you're watching via the Mojo 50 Radio Facebook page. And if you're listening and you want to watch, you can head over right now and do so. Folks, I know there are a lot of you that are in the same boat as me. So I'm not telling you about my personal life to give you some pity party or whatever, but I want to make sure that this space that we have together, this time that we have together every week, is a space that you can reach out to, that you can find hope in, that you can find some positivity in, because that's the route that I've taken. Yeah, I didn't technically lose my job. I've been furloughed from my job. So I want to give you some examples of the positivity that I have taken, and maybe these are things that you can take into consideration in your own life. First off, I think it's a positive in the fact that I still have my health care benefits. I still have the things that I need outside of, the money from work. That's a very positive thing. I could be completely without a job and be completely screwed having to pay for COBRA insurance. Now, luckily, the government has said, okay, we're going to allow every single person, regardless of their insurance status, to get covered for COVID-19. That's a positive thing, but also, why is it the government's job? Shouldn't it just be that insurance companies say, you know what, we're not going to worry about it? Or hospitals just say, you know what, we're not going to worry about your insurance. We're going to worry about your life first and foremost. But then the other positive aspects of things for me is I've gotten a chance to take a step back and ask if I'm really happy with what I'm doing at work or the company that I work for. Or let's say you're a business owner. Maybe, just maybe, you've not been happy with the direction of your company. Or there are things that you would like to change that you've just not had the time or ability to change. Or you've been too scared to change. Well, guess what? Now's a perfect time to hit that reset button, whether it's in your job, whether that's in your family life, whether that is in a lot of things. There are opportunities to be had in this time. And I think it's important that you have that perspective. So what I'm going to tell you people is, if you're feeling anxious, if you feel like you're depressed or whatever is going on in your life, please reach out to me. Hit me up on Twitter at The Coppins Show, on Facebook at The Coppins Show. You can reach out to me via the show email address, criticalthinkingshow@gmail.com, criticalthinkingshow@gmail.com. Please know that I am here to listen. We're in this together, and we will get through this together. And that's the theme of this show, is that we need togetherness, and we're not seeing a lot of it. Whether that's through the blame game that's being played, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, by previewing what you see over at my YouTube channel. By the way, hit that subscribe button, that notification bell. If you're not already there, that's your call to action this week on the show. Hit up the YouTube page. We need to get that subscriber number up, and I know you mojo sexuals out there love you some good content, and I think I provide that to you. So you're going to see some of that content as we talk about the blame game that's being played. We're also going to talk about President Trump apparently ceding his presidency to Dr. President Fauci now. And then I'm going to show you why you should assume you're always being lied to when it comes to the numbers of COVID-19. But before we get any further, folks, preparedness. You've got to be prepared in a time like this. And, well, what better way to be prepared than with some emergency food supply from our friends over at My Patriot Supply? What happens if we run into a food shortage? Because guess what? When I talk to farmers and other people involved in the agricultural industry in Iowa and in Wisconsin and in other states, they're really scared about the price drop that has happened to products that they produce, things like corn and wheat and all of that sort of stuff. Now, what would happen if we have a food shortage? Well, if you're prepared by buying My Patriot Supply, you are not in the same boat as everybody else. I know many of you think though, My Patriot Supply is probably freeze-dried MRE type food, but folks, it actually tastes really good. Most importantly, it makes you less reliant on other individuals. So, do yourself a favor. Head over to preparewithmojo50.com. Again, preparewithmojo50.com. Get yourself a 2-week or a 4-week supply of emergency food. Right now, you can get $100 off of a 4-week supply. Or you can spend $87 and get $70 off the original price for that 2-week supply of emergency food. $87, folks, that's it. For most of you, that's less than what you would spend on 2 weeks worth of groceries for your family. But you'll only get that discount by heading over to preparewithmojo50.com. Again, preparewithmojo50.com. Don't be caught being unprepared. Thanks to our friends at My Patriot Supply. Now, speaking of being prepared, it's the exact opposite of what our federal, state, and local governments were for this pandemic. But there is some positive news. And like I said, positivity, hope, all of those things are kind of the theme of this show. Showing you there's a way forward. And that is that regulations, those of us who love freedom and think regulations have been way overblown, are seeing the results of that being reversed. That's right. The federal government is reversing a ton of regulations right now. States are reversing regulations. And the folks over at Reason.com produced 10, at least 10. There are plenty more, but these are the top 10. So I wanted to go over them and give you an idea of what is happening with regulations. Number one is the CDC testing monopoly is gone. No longer are they the single source for COVID-19 testing or testing the results. That is good news. Then we've got some states waiving the regulations about having to be licensed in their specific state to be a doctor. That's also good news. The TSA has released the 3.4 ounce regulation on liquids because apparently that's now safe. You can now get a 12 ounce bottle of Purell on your carry-on luggage. The Alcohol Tax and Trade Bureau has allowed distilleries to make hand sanitizer. A lot of localities are also getting rid of the regulation against to-go alcohol sales. In fact, in Wisconsin, one of my favorite stories is that Fridays are fish fries, whether that's during Lent or throughout the rest of the year. Fish fries are a famous thing in the state of Wisconsin. But what goes with a fish fry is a good Wisconsin old-fashioned, not the crap that you get in Chicago or New York or whatever. A good Wisconsin old-fashioned, folks. You can get them to go now. You couldn't before. So you get a fish fry with that old-fashioned. Your Friday tradition, while not out and about with other people, can be had at home, and you don't have to make any of it. That's good news. The FDA has released regulations on everything from ventilator manufacturing, what types of masks are okay to be used, who can make diagnostic testing kits, who can make hand sanitizer, because not only can distilleries, but also pharmacies, which antiviral drugs can be given out. Hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin are just a few of those. Even who gets to practice telemedicine. And there are many, many more regulations the FDA has gotten rid of. Medicare is now paying for telemedicine, but they weren't before. And also, screw HIPAA. You can now do telemedicine via Skype and FaceTime. We also have the bail system being much greater reduced than ever before because they don't want people from the outside infecting people in jails and in prisons and all those things if they don't have to. All of this, what do all of these things have in common? Well, it turns out that they weren't about health and safety for regulations to begin with. They were about what? Power and control. Control from the government side of things, and then power for big-ass corporations to monopolize things like ventilator manufacturing or who can make certain types of masks, right? Why would those things be okay now? We can release all of those things. Why would they be okay during a pandemic and not okay in the outside world? None of these regulations I have mentioned make any sense whether or not you have a pandemic on your hands or you don't. They're asinine to begin with. But folks, we've got a lot of other things to talk about here. And one of the things I want to point out to you is that while all of this is great news and the regulations are temporarily closed down, the key word is temporarily. We need to keep our eye on the ball here. We need to know, we need to demand that these types of regulations are never in place again, ever again. We would have the ability to quickly respond to these things. We would have the ability to allow the private sector, not the government, to really up the ante when it comes to fighting pandemics like this. And most importantly, we would have the government much more off of our backs of business and individuals than ever before. So demand, if we see these temporary restrictions coming back in place, start writing congresspeople, your senators, your president, all of these people. Put the pressure on them to then put the pressure on the regulators to stop these things coming back online. That's what we need to do. But most importantly, we need to keep their feet to the fire. And unfortunately, we don't have an ally in the media because all they're interested in is playing the blame game. And that brings me to the blame game segment that I put up on my YouTube page earlier this week. And folks, all you have to do, youtube.com, search Andrew Coppins, or you go over to my Twitter page. You'll find it in the bio. You'll see the link. Click on it, subscribe, hit that notification bell. But I wanted to bring this up because I think this is a point that we need to talk about here on the show. It's time for the blame game. I mean, what else is there to do while you and I are under stay-at-home orders and in some cases under pressure of fines and jail if you violate what the government tells you you get to do? Am I right? We're about 3 weeks into the panic of the COVID-19 pandemic, and as you would expect, all sorts of craziness has come home to roost. But the one thing that's got me going today is this idea from both sides, by the way, that someone must take the blame for what's happening here. On the left, as with everything, it's all President Donald Trump's fault. On the right, well, they're looking to China and its inaction, deceit, and misinformation as the sole culprit for what's happening. In the media, it's Trump's fault and they're buying into the misinformation that China is putting out. You don't have to believe me, by the way. You can just listen to Joe Scarborough drop this bit of knowledge.
Now, we've heard, Zeke Emanuel, that nobody could have seen this coming. The fact is everybody saw this coming. Everybody saw this coming in early January. So I know I know you, like me.
It's just too bad that Scarborough or anyone else on his network could not be bothered to once mention the virus and its outbreak in China until January 18th. Scarborough couldn't be bothered to mention the virus until January 24th himself, and guess what that mention was? It was actually in an interview with MSNBC's medical expert who was telling America that, wait for it, we should be much more concerned about the seasonal flu than this virus. Meanwhile, President Trump was closing our border to travel from China, and those same media types were busy calling him a racist and a xenophobe. It's not just the media either, by the way. We've got the NYC health commissioner telling us everything is going to be all right in early February.
The risk to New Yorkers for coronavirus is low, and that our preparedness as a city is very high. There is no reason not to take the subway, not to take the bus, not to go out to your favorite restaurant, and certainly not to miss the parade next Sunday. I'm going to be there.
Fast forward to this week and, well, NYC is the epicenter of the outbreak, with the city representing 27% of all deaths in the United States and the state of New York making up nearly 40% of all death. The state also happens to be home to 39% of all cases in the country, according to data from Wednesday at worldometers.com and nymeg.com. Whoops. So, pardon me if I don't trust that those people who couldn't be bothered to take this seriously months ago are somehow now interested in throwing blame around to anyone else but themselves. After all, we are supposed to take this so seriously that we suicided our economy, and we're told that it's a sacrifice we must be making to save hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives. Basically, we're told to take it on the chin and don't ask questions. Let the experts handle things and, well, we'll be all right. Yet these same experts, these same talking heads and reporters, these same politicians are getting busy not fixing issues, but making sure they've lined out the proper blame for how we got to where we currently are. Now, don't get me wrong, the experts may indeed be right on those predictions and models. I'm not interested in talking about the science and the modeling here. I've done plenty of questioning already, and you can find those questions being asked in other videos on this channel. I'm more interested in finding the correct path forward, and that's where my frustration comes in most here. I won't pretend I've got all or any of the scientific answers, because that's indeed a specialty I don't have. But if I see studies and fellow scientists who don't agree, wouldn't it be prudent to, allow those people to publicly and openly have their questions answered by those so-called experts we're supposed to just blindly trust? That, folks, is what many of us in the libertarian and conservative side of things are just simply saying here. We're seeing reputable scientists at colleges that we all accept are elite saying they question the studies these experts are relying on and would like to take a closer look. But dare to ask those questions and you're now a denier or a hater or whatever. Even if you're just simply asking them, show us the code or the models that you are using so that we, the dullards, could possibly verify what is being told to us as the gospel from on high, aka Dr. Anthony Fauci and Neil Ferguson of Imperial College. If we as people didn't ask questions of established science before, would we know that the earth isn't flat, or that gravity exists, or that we orbit around the sun and not the other way around, or any other number of scientific advancements? No. Asking questions is key here. But there's a difference between asking questions and placing blame. And that seems to be all anyone is interested in these days. Here's my reality when it comes to COVID-19. Placing blame on any one person or organization is frankly stupid. Did the FDA screw things up with all of its red tape? Perhaps. Did the CDC screw up by not allowing anyone else to produce a COVID-19 test or give results out? Perhaps. Did the media screw things up by calling Trump a racist for daring to say that Chinese people could not travel in the midst of its coronavirus outbreak and thus downplay the significant threat this virus actually posed? Perhaps. Did the media screw things up by failing to ask skeptical questions of anyone, especially the Chinese government numbers and the WHO? Perhaps. Did our political class screw things up by panicking and rushing to conclusions based on one epidemiological study that was later walked back based off of these dubious claims of, see, I was actually right. We will only hit the lower end of our estimates, not the 2.2 million dead in America or the 500,000 dead in the UK, because of the mitigation efforts that we recommended. But see, it's only been a week. Perhaps. Did President Trump screw things up by not pulling together all of the bureaucratic entities and tell them to get their collective shit together sooner than March? Perhaps. Does placing blame on them solve the current situation we find ourselves in? No. Does placing blame help us recover an economy that we sent into the ditch? No. Does placing blame save more lives? No. It does no one any good. We are where we are at, and we need to come together as a society. Instead, we've got a president who is often more interested in landing cheap shots than leading. Instead, we've got a media hell-bent on trying to bring Trump down at all costs. Truth be damned. And we've got politicians on both sides of the aisle more interested in making sure this crisis doesn't go to waste if you smell what I'm cooking. Do you see the problem here? At times like this, we need unity and truth. We are getting neither of them from the institutions that we're supposed to be trusting. So pardon me if I don't just blindly trust the experts that the government, whether that's federal, state, or local, trot out in front of us on a daily basis. You've given us all reasons to not believe you. Pardon me if I don't trust that the media that's decided to air this segment between the Como brothers on CNN while President Trump was doing a press briefing at the White House.
Understood. Now, you've been really giving people a lot of comfort about recognizing the difficulties of staying at home, making an effort, obviously, to be home. You got your kids up there with you. You're keeping them close. You know, you said something about yourself where you said, I'm not really good at cooking and, I've had to learn and do stuff with the kids. I don't know why you take your shot at that. I mean, just because you don't cook. I mean, Mom shares her secrets about how to make sauce. Very few people. I mean, you shouldn't criticize yourself that you're not one of the people that Mom saw as worthy to, teach how to cook and make tomato sauce.
Well, look, I'm sure she would have. It's just that you spent so much more time in the kitchen, Chris, than I did. you were just available to her. You know, you had that always like mom's little helper in the kitchen. I really respect that. So I think it's because you were there and always underfoot.
Yeah, see, I don't see it that way.
How many? I mean, you spent years in the kitchen when you think of it.
I don't see it that way. I didn't spend years in the kitchen.
I didn't mean to offend you. I didn't mean to offend you.
Maybe you did, but that's okay. There's no offense taken. There's no offense taken. But what I'm saying is,
please.
Yet, at the same time, that media now has the audacity to try to play the blame game. Yet, NYC Mayor Bill de Blasio has the audacity to try to blame President Trump for his city's inability to be prepared, like his own health commissioner told us they were back in that February press conference I just played for you. All of those people, all of those institutions are currently more interested in placing blame than figuring out what the hell is actually happening and how to best mitigate this pandemic. They're so stuck so badly in panic mode that they can't even see the forest through the trees, and it's not them that's going to suffer because of it. So politicians, media members, and the American people, can we please stop placing blame and start to focus on ideas, products, medicine, and the like that will actually help solve the problem? No matter the solution, this is going to take time. Why not calm down, lay out all the options on the table in a transparent way for the American people and the world to see, and make a decision based on all of the information, all of the science, instead of just blindly trusting individuals that have let us down time and again to be our saviors? Maybe, just maybe, the answer to a positive step forward is to stop looking backwards and actually start looking forward. Maybe, just maybe, that path forward is to actually begin to tell us what measures will be good enough for us to begin to pull the car, aka the economy, out of the ditch before it sinks so far down we can't pull it back up. Maybe, just maybe, the experts need to stop living in the bubble of science and start looking at considerations outside of their ideal modeling of health concerns. Maybe, just maybe, our media need to do their damn job and hold the experts to the same levels of scrutiny that they apply to Donald Trump. Namely, not believing a single word that comes out of their mouths without actual data and reliable information that could be verified. Maybe, just maybe, it would be wise to leave the blame game for a time and date when we actually are past the worst of this crap. Then again, our government, our healthcare industry, and our politicians learned next to nothing about pandemic control the last time this happened. Remember, H1N1 was going to be the wake-up call. And this was never going to happen again. Well, maybe, just maybe, we, the American people, need to set aside all of these failing institutions and trust each other more than we do today. Maybe, just maybe, our path through all of this is through stopping the political posturing and coming to a common understanding. You see, Americans have proven time and again they will rise to any occasion and usually win the day. But it will only happen when we've got a larger society that is bought in to the cause and that the shared sacrifice is worth it in the end. Unfortunately, we've become so distrustful of each other as a larger society that tribalistic politics is all we really know today. We couldn't possibly see someone who has differing political persuasions as also having a common goal to achieve in the end. Such is the state of this union that I couldn't even tell you what that cause would be right now. Is it really beating COVID-19 or getting politicians out of office? Or is it getting political wish lists through or altering the ties that bind us for one's own personal gain? What say you? Are we playing the blame game to our own detriment? Or are we so far gone as a society there's really no hope of unity again? I'd like to believe the answer to the final question is no, because I remember that brief glimmer of commonality that happened after 9/11. Now, I'm going to let you ponder those thoughts and questions as we head into break right here on Mojo 50 Radio and the Mojo 50 Radio Facebook page. Again, hit up that Twitter, hit up that Facebook, and most importantly, let's get that YouTube channel over the 100 subscriber mark for this week. That's right, folks. Simple, 5 seconds. Go do it. You'll get content every Tuesday, every Thursday, and of course, you'll be able to see the replay of this show on that YouTube channel. right, I hope you had a chance to recharge the batteries, maybe grab a new beverage and enjoy yourself a little bit and think about the blame game, where we are as a society and how we can positively get through this. I think it's by coming together, but the only way we can come together is if we actually agree upon the facts and figures, and that is where I think we're having the largest disconnect, and that's why in the second half of the show, I want to go over what is happening when it comes to the facts, figures, numbers, and who's presenting them, how they're being presented to us, the American people. Now, President Trump, I get it, right? His job is not to know everything. That is impossible. He can't possibly know the intricacies of what's happening in Mozambique or Timbuktu or whatever, right? He can't possibly know all of those things. And Trump certainly shows us nearly on a daily basis that he doesn't know everything or nearly anything, if you want to be 100% accurate here. So surrounding yourself with the right individuals and the people that are the experts in those fields is supposed to be the right course of path, if you will, right? So enter Dr. Anthony Fauci, a career public health servant, a guy who has spent his life in infectious diseases and all that stuff, for his entire adult life. He's the man who has taken center stage here as the expert, the person that's going to let us all know the information that we need to know and trust, right? So much so, by the way, that people are really beginning to wonder if it's actually President Fauci, not President Trump, if you're catching my drift. Because it seems like he's the man that's pulling the strings behind the scenes here, and maybe he should be, given the fact that he is the expert. But maybe he shouldn't be, because the numbers are not adding up to the statements that he makes. Over the past 2 months, it's been absolutely ridiculous the amount of crap that has come out of Dr. Anthony Fauci's mouth. That doesn't add up. He says one thing in February, then the exact opposite in March, and then he says something on March 16th, and then 2 days later contradicts himself. For instance, CNBC actually compiled a list of statements and the timeline of what Dr. Anthony Fauci has told us. So let's go through some of it.
Health officials, myself included, have said in the past that travel restrictions are not going to stop completely when you have an outbreak. That is a true pandemic. But I think most health officials agree that at best it delays and, as the secretary says, kind of pauses things. And that's really the reason and the underlying rationale why that was done. I mean, if there is, and I hope it doesn't happen, a broad pandemic throughout the world, travel restrictions are not going to help. You can't just travel restrict everyone.
We are reasonably well prepared. We've had a pandemic preparedness plan that we put together years ago. And what the CDC was talking about is taking the process from containment to mitigation. And mitigation means to be prepared to do things that would slow down the spread if we had an influx of infections, such as closing schools, social distancing, teleworking, and things like that. We need to start thinking about that now, even though it isn't absolutely necessary to implement it now.
We're dealing with clearly an emerging infectious disease that has now reached outbreak proportions and likely pandemic proportions.
If you look at the cases that have come to the attention of the medical authorities in China, and you just do the math is about 2%. If you look at certain age groups, certain risk groups, the fatality is much higher. But as a group, it's going to depend completely on what the factor of asymptomatic cases are. So if you have asymptomatic cases that are a lot, it's going to come down. What we're hearing right now on a recent call from the WHO this morning is that there aren't as many asymptomatic cases as we think, which made them elevate, I think, what their mortality is. You know, as well as anybody, that the mortality for seasonal flu is 0.1%. So even if it goes down to 1%, it's still 10 times more fatal. The system is not really geared to what we need right now, what you are asking for. That is a failing.
And failing, yes.
It is a failing. I mean, let's admit it. The fact is, the way the system was set up, is that the public health component that Dr. Redfield was talking about was a system where you put it out there in the public and a physician asks for it and you get it. The idea of anybody getting it easily, the way people in other countries are doing it, we're not set up for that. Do I think we should be? Yes, but we're not.
Early on, we weren't in the situation where we could actually get the tests out in a broad way. And I mentioned on the show last week that we need to get the private sector involved. And just a couple of days ago, we had the CEOs there who are going to be now putting it on full overdrive. So I would expect that very soon. When I say soon, I'm talking about days to a week, where you're going to start to see it go up like this. Not everybody tomorrow is going to be able to get a test, but pretty soon you're going to see a major escalation of capability and implementation.
The areas of the country that are not hotspots, that are not going through the terrible ordeal that New York and California and Washington State are going through, they still have a window of a significant degree of being able to contain. In other words, when you test, you find somebody, you isolate them, you get them out of circulation, and you do the contact tracing. When you have a big outbreak, it's tough to do anything but mitigation. We have an opportunity now that we have the availability of testing to do that. So you're going to be hearing more about how we can inform where we're going, particularly because we have the ability to test. What we're starting to see now in the Southern Hemisphere, in Southern Africa, and in the Southern Hemisphere countries is that we're having cases that are appearing as they go into their winter season. And if, in fact, they have a substantial outbreak, it will be inevitable that we need to be prepared that we'll get a cycle around the second time. What does that mean for us in what we're doing? It totally emphasizes the need to do what we're doing in developing a vaccine, testing it quickly, and trying to get it ready so that we'll have a vaccine available for that next cycle.
So maybe Trump should cut back on the time that this guy spends in front of the camera? Because the more that this man talks, the less he's making any damn sense. And I want to back up to something that was said in that video clip. March 24th. Remember that statement, March 24th, what he said in that statement in a second. But let's also remember that as of today, as of April 4th, 2020, President Fauci is telling us that we must have a national stay-at-home order. We must nationally do this. Poor Dr. Fauci. I'm sorry that there's this thing called the Constitution that doesn't allow for the federal government to tell us all what we can do on that level. I know it's getting in the way of your scientific genius. Oh, Lord on high, Dr. Fauci, I'm sorry that we've sinned against you. Seriously, dude, get over yourself. You're not the arbiter, the end-all, be-all of all of this, and I'm about to lay out the case for why. Does anybody really believe that this virus, by the way, somehow stops at the border of a state and it shall not pass? I mean, seriously, come on now. How dumb do you think the American people really are? That's an honest question. How dumb do you think we are? But I'm going to humor President Fauci for a second here. I'm going to play his game, this idea that we should have a national stay-at-home order. And I'm going to do that before I bring up the fact that he's got some pretty strange backup in this idea. Well, let's go to the stats. Let's go to the numbers to tell us why. You know, stats like, oh, gee, I don't know. Let's remember first that it was President Fauci just 10 days ago that told us that we've got a chance to mitigate in areas that are not hotspots. Isolate those individuals who have COVID-19. Isolate those that are the most vulnerable. Get them out of circulation, if you will. So what's changed? Let's take a look at these stats. Did you know that 42 states and or territories, so 42 of the 56 states and or territories, have under 100 deaths? Why do we need to have a national stay-at-home order when most states, the vast majority of them, have no problem dealing with this disease, or this virus, I should say? Let's just take Arizona, who, I don't know, could be a state that is a major problem because it has a ton of people that are older that go down in these months. You know, the snowbirds from the north, they also are the epicenter of Major League Baseball's spring training, which was going on until the middle of this past month. If any state should have a massive problem with this, it should be a state like Arizona. I know there are sparse areas of Arizona, but the vast majority of the people that live in Arizona live in major metropolitan areas. There's a lot of desert, but there's also a lot of people packed tightly together. Phoenix, Flagstaff, Tucson, you could go on and on and on. So, to date, just 41 deaths have occurred in that state. 41. Just 1,769 people have actually tested positive for COVID-19. 1,769 people have tested positive, compared to nearly 23,000 who have come back negative. So if we're doing the math there, it's a very, very small percentage of the people who are even being tested that come back positive. 41 of 1,769 people. But that state needs to go on a mandatory lockdown. You could look at a state like Alaska or a state like Wyoming or Montana and look at their numbers. I think in Alaska, they've got, 3 people? In fact, let me just go to those numbers right now for you. So I'm going to look at Alaska. They've got 3 deaths and 157 people testing positive. 5,859 negative tests in Alaska. You mean to tell me for 157 people, they're going to lock that entire state down? Are you nuts? Are you absolutely insane, President Fauci? It's absolutely nuts. What the data is telling us is that we need to isolate the hotspots. Don't allow travel in or out of those hotspots. Do the draconian things there. Isolate the potentially really compromised individuals to limit the number of deaths and let the rest of us go live our freaking lives. That's what the data is telling us. But yet we've got President Fauci telling us the exact freaking opposite. It doesn't make sense. And I'm sorry, we have our federalist constitutional system in place that we can't bow down to your every whim. Now, that brings me to Anthony Fauci's backup plan here, or at least his willing minions, the late night talk show hosts. Seriously. No, I'm being deadly serious, people. These self-important jackasses are now banging on about, why are we not on a national lockdown? Did you bother to read the data? And if so, and you interpret that data to mean a national lockdown is necessary, I'd like to know where you're getting your education from, where you got it from, and what the hell is going through your head. I mean, just how awful are these individuals? You know, I get a list every morning from this website called Grabian, okay? And this website is basically allowing us to do a whole ton of the videos that you see here on the show. And every morning it's Kimmel, Seth Meyers, Trevor Noah, Stephen Colbert, banging on and on about how Donald Trump is the evil person and all the evilness of Donald Trump and how shame on him and the blame game that's going on with COVID-19. That's your spearhead of this blame game, by the way. But they're also banging on about how we need to have a national lockdown. Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Trevor Noah, we don't have the system that you had in your native country. But you're here in the United States now, and we have a constitution. You can't just go locking everybody down. Now, I'm not above, having fun at the expense of the president or any president for that matter. I think Donald Trump is definitely fair game in all of this. But the problem is that the jokes are not even funny, and they're not even jokes most of the time. They're just their own political commentary, as if their political commentary matters the most, as if they're the only arbiters of what could possibly be the outcome in front of us, what could possibly be done. They are the ultimate woke scolds. That's who these people have become. And on top of this, it would be another thing if they were shoving the jokes about Donald Trump down our throats, if they were also doing it, about Joe Biden, AOC, Nancy Pelosi, How about Anthony Fauci himself? Or how about, I don't know, Chuck Schumer? None of these people get the same treatment. None of them have jokes made about them. I mean, Biden is perfect fodder for this shit. The guy crawled out of his hole, embarrassed himself by coughing all over the place, forgetting his lines, and all sorts of craziness. Literal craziness. Literal dementia. And then his handler said, whoa, we might not want him this far out over his skis, so let's put him back into his hole. You don't think that would have been room for political fodder? Or for comedy fodder? And on top of it, these individuals are still producing shows as if they're just, here to entertain us. There is literally nothing entertaining about what you're doing. You are so self-important that your show must go on, but the rest of us must be on lockdown. The rest of us cannot possibly earn a living. But you can? Get off your freaking high horse, Trevor Noah, Stephen Colbert, and especially Seth Meyers and Jimmy Kimmel. You self-important jackasses. Seriously. But equally, I understand that Anthony Fauci, Dr. Fauci, or President Fauci, whatever you want to call him, okay? I understand he's got a very difficult job and that he's never going to get everything right. But this sort of statistical analysis ain't hard. I know that I do this for a living on the outside of this show. I know that I do data-driven analysis every single day. But so do you. How is it possible that we see the data in front of us and interpret it in two completely different ways? So this leads to two things. One, the fact that people are taking this to the extreme of threatening death upon Dr. Fauci is totally wrong. The fact that this man has to have a security detail is asinine. And if you're one of those people threatening him, whether that's via Twitter, Facebook, letters, or in real life, you are part of the problem. But equally, I think the fact that Dr. Fauci continues to tell us one thing one day and tell us the exact opposite the next is equally damning. So I understand he's got a difficult job, that he's in a difficult position, and that everybody's hanging on his every word, but it's not hard to get to the truth here. So one of three things has to be true about these individuals. Either the information that President Fauci is working off of is so inaccurate it cannot be trusted, in which case, why in the hell are you spewing those conclusions out for public consumption at all? Or secondly, we're really about to be screwed until a vaccine is actually in production. Then thirdly, the third option is that we've actually suicided our economy at the behest of people who actually have no damn clue what they're talking about. It could be that they're getting bad data and they can't figure out how to interpret that data. In which case, why is it wrong for us to question why we're listening to them in the first place? So those are the three conclusions, the three possible outcomes, at least in my interpretation of the data, of the counts that are being given, of what people are actually saying on the ground. One of those three things is the correct scenario at play here. And furthermore, let's talk about the data points that are actually happening. But before we do that, some honesty, some truth, some good, honest, quality product. That's what we need to talk about here. And we're going to talk about cat coolers. They're new to this show, but they're not new to the Mojo 50 radio family. Catcoolers.com. Folks, I'm telling you, there's nothing as we go into summer months and potentially being able to get out to go to a beach or, use your pool or, do things outdoors. There's nothing worse than a bad cooler. There's nothing worse than sticking a cooler out there and everything is melted and your beverages are not cold in 3 hours' time. You know what would solve it? Getting yourself a cat cooler. You can go to catcoolers.com, find a 27, a 55 quart, and an 88 quart cooler. It might set you back a little bit, but it's worth it in the end. Spend $30 on a stupid Igloo cooler and then do it again 3 months from now, and again, and again, and again, and it eventually adds up. Why not get a rugged, a tough, a durable, and meant to be outdoors cooler? Catcoolers.com. You can get them in yellow, black, white, camo. You can get drinkware. You can get accessories. You can get all sorts of wonderful goodness. Catcoolers.com. Get yourself one of them and let you know that Mojo50 sent you there. Catcoolers.com. All right, so speaking of accuracy and ruggedness and toughness, we have got to allow the data to speak here, okay? And we've talked about some of the deaths, right? And we've talked about the numbers of the states that have less than 100 deaths in them. 42 of 56 states, right? So we have to assume that we're being lied to because the information that's in front of us just doesn't make any sense compared to what the reaction has been, right? You tell me if any of this is making sense to you. Luckily, Sean Davis over at The Federalist has been on top of the lies of the COVID-19 numbers for quite some time here. You see, Sean is actually doing what journalists are supposed to do, holding our powers to be accountable for what they tell us is happening or should be happening in this case. What you need to know before I get into the numbers that Sean is producing is why you should be assuming that you're being lied to. Because most of the modeling that President Fauci, President Trump and his expert team are relying on comes from the IMHE. You can look up the data for yourself, by the way, and I'll put this in the description to the show. But you can go to covidtracking.com/data and covid19.healthdata.org/projections. But Mr. Davis did some digging, and I think it's interesting to go through. So here's what he found out about state by state and United States projections versus reality. According to Sean Davis himself, the IMHE model for the Wuhan coronavirus that the White House is relying on is garbage. It is using New York, New Jersey data and applying it to the rest of the United States. It predicted that over 121,000 Americans would be hospitalized yesterday over the coronavirus, which was April 1st, by the way. The actual number, 31,142. That's like maybe a third at best. Now, what some people will say is that, well, the states are not giving out similar information and they're all, doing different things with their data. Okay, that's fine. Let's assume that that assumption is in place here. Shouldn't that also be written into your modeling? We can go even further. Sean Davis points out, state data. The IMHE model predicted that 1,716 people in Texas would have been hospitalized. 196 people were. In Georgia, that number was 2,077 projected, 952 actually hospitalized. In Virginia, they said 607 people would have been hospitalized. The actual number, 305. And guess what, folks? That is the closest these projections ever got. And they were still 50% off. They're not even halfway correct. In Tennessee, the IMHE model predicted that 2,200 people. It turns out it was just 200. In New York, it was supposed to be 50,962. The actual number, 18,368. We could go on and on and on if you wanted to about those numbers. But the whole point here is, well, when you look at the raw data, the projections are way the hell off. Yet we're supposed to just use them. But we can also look at the raw data that the IMHE is using here. Okay? In the United States, there have been over 1.1 million tests administered for COVID-19. Only 19% of those even tested overall have come back positive. That number would be about 274,000. Okay? 7,040 people as of April 4th this morning have died of COVID-19. That means the death rate is 2.5% for those that are tested positive. If you just go to all people that have been tested, the death rate drops to 0.4%. Pretty damn close to, wait for it, the flu mortality rate. I know, how dare I bring up the flu comparison. But did you know that over 10,000 people have officially recovered from COVID-19? And that's nearly 4% of all of those who have been diagnosed with COVID-19 so far. It's also more people recovered than dead when you look at the line trends. And the separation is only looking like it's going to increase between the number of recovered versus the number of dead. It's not hard, folks. But it doesn't matter to the media and it doesn't matter to anybody else because all that matters to them is ratings. And, well, what's selling is apparently the death tolls. Now, I know we're not supposed to be comparing this to all of the flu, but let's think about this, okay? Let's think logically here. All I'm trying to say is that the comparison all along between the reaction from the media, the reaction of our political class, has been all out of whack. Can you imagine the local newspapers, the evening newscasts, the 24-hour cable news networks going all wall to wall with death tolls from influenza? But let's remember, 35,000 to 65,000 is the average death toll here in America every year from the flu. Yet we're being told that asking questions or caring about the economic apocalypse that we're seeing means you don't care about the lives of the dead people from COVID-19. Okay, then, well, why don't you care about the 35,000 to 65,000 that die every year from the flu? Isn't a life a life? And what's the difference between somebody who dies of the flu and dies of COVID-19? I'm just asking. And by your standards, shouldn't we care about the 800,000 lives that are snuffed out every year before they've ever had a chance to actually live a life? This thing called abortion? While we're at it, right? If a life is a life and it matters whether or not it dies to you, if it matters every single day, if you feel so deeply about these deaths, did any of you bother to even note that we had an epidemic level of influenza happening in November, December, and January? No, none of you bothered to even notice. I'm just applying the standard that you all tell us exists now. Or could it be that you're just using this as a talking point and a cudgel against other people who don't happen to agree with the way that you want this handled? It's all a ridiculous game that the political class are trying to play here. It's all ridiculous. Do not fall into the trap. Do not engage. But if you want to engage, just ask them to name one person who's not a celebrity who has died of COVID-19. And then name one of the 35 to 65,000 people who die every year of the flu. Name one. Without Googling. They can't and they won't. That's how unserious this all is. I think the vast majority of Americans care about their fellow man dying. But they also know the reality is that some people will die of influenza, just as some people will die of COVID-19. Yet we don't shut everything down for the epidemic levels of the flu and the overwhelming of our ERs and our hospital beds, because that happens every single year. Talk to anybody in your life that's a nurse or that has been dealing with infectious disease or employee health. They'll tell you that they get to epidemic levels at certain times all throughout the year dealing with the flu. And let's focus on the models that actually should work and how we can get to a path to get us to prosperity, to get us back to living a normal life as quickly as possible. No one seems to want to talk about that. So I'm just going to leave you with that here on today's show. Please, as always, follow on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at The Coppins Show. And as always, be smart, be safe. Matthew 5:44.